My administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do.
Moments after saying that, President Trump signed an executive order dismantling the Department of Education. Now, you're probably wondering, what is this going to mean for maybe you or your kids, your students, your Pell Grants, or your student loans? Now, before I get into all of that, I want to bring up three important points. One, do you remember that continuing resolution that just passed in the House and the Senate last week to keep the government open through September 30th? Well, that funding bill allocated money for the Department of Education. So while there may be less money allocated to the department than in years past, there still is absolutely money in this year's budget going to the Department of Education, regardless of this new executive order. The second important point you need to understand, while this order will basically gut the existing operation of the Department of Education and may slow down its function, an executive order cannot make the department disappear. That's because in 1979, Congress created the Department of Education as a cabinet-level department by passing a law. That means Congress would need to pass a new law if they want to dissolve it. That means that law would likely need 60 votes in the United States Senate, which means several Democrats would have to also support it. It's a fact that President Trump hinted at today.
And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them, but everybody knows it's right.
It's unclear if any Democrats believe it's right, but we'll have to wait and see. And one more thing you need to understand about the Department of Education. Despite the president continuing to say that he wants to return education to the states, the fact is public schools are mostly funded by the states and local governments. So by definition, that means states already have control over the money and the policy in those classrooms. The federal government only accounts for about 10% of total school funding. That money is distributed by the Education Department largely according to federal law and not at the discretion of the president. So with all that said, let's talk about what happened today and what today's executive order actually means. The reality is what happened today raises a lot of questions. And the fact is, there are a lot of details that are currently missing into how this is actually going to work. The order says the Secretary of Education shall, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states and local communities while ensuring the effective and uninterrupted delivery of services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely. So, what does that mean for your kids, for Title I funding, including funding for low-income students and for students who have learning disabilities? And what does it mean for your Pell Grants? Well, the president says none of those things are going away.
Well, if you look at the Pell Grants, it's supposed to be a very good program, Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs. They're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them.
The question is, which agencies are those things going to be redistributed to? The order does not say. Now, when it comes to your federal student loans, yes, even if the Department of Education is gone, you will absolutely still have to pay those. Those are not going to disappear. The order specifically says the Education Department is currently managing a student loan debt portfolio of more than $1.6 trillion, and the president believes the Department of Education is just not equipped to deal with that. The order says the Department of Education is not a bank, and it must return bank functions to an entity equipped to serve America's students. Again, there are a lot of questions about which government department or agency is going to step into the role to manage your student loan debt payments and which agency is going to handle the FAFSA application and your federal student aid money. This order does not answer those questions. So if you want to read this order and the accompanying fact sheet that the White House distributed for yourself, I'm going to email both things out to you tonight in my Facts HQ email, so make sure you sign yourself up.